Hi folks, hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be looking at a few of Dan Huff's speed picking secrets. So recently I've been transcribing a lot of Dan's stuff in preparation for my Session Heroes course, which is going to be coming out over the summer. And it's illuminated a few interesting technique things which I wanted to start sharing with you guys. Now, like many of us, I'm sure I've always been blown away by Dan's technique and his dexterity. And with a lot of his solos on Giants records, for example, I'd assume that a lot of the faster passages were kind of straight alternate picking. And it wasn't until I started checking out guys covering those solos who were alternate picking all of those fast passages that I started to think maybe there was something else going on, because it didn't sound quite right. It sounded incredible. These guys have got incredible technique, but it sounded a little bit different. And it kind of turns out that what's happening with Dan's playing a lot of the time is a really interesting, clever mix of alternate picking, hammer-ons and pull-offs, and occasionally economy picking as well. But it's balanced in such a way that it sounds so fluid, as if everything were alternate picked. So today's lesson is going to kind of serve as an introduction to this stuff, and then there'll be a follow-up lesson at a later day. This is just to get us kind of to grips with some of the fundamental techniques going on here. Okay, so the shape we are going to use today is just a 3-note per string major scale. So we're going to have, starting on the 8th fret of the low E string, 8, 10, 12, 8, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12, 10, 12, 13, 10, 12, 13. Okay, so just 3-note per string major scale in the key of C. Now, if we were to try and do a descending run in this, alternate picked, we immediately encounter a bit of a problem, because if we have, which would be down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, what happens is, when we play the third note, so we go down, up, down, it's actually taking our picking hand further away from the next string which we're moving to, which means we've got suddenly a distance of like, I don't know, 12 millimeters to get to the B string, which is obviously going to slow us down. So the other option is, well, do we do it kind of economy picking? So we go up, down, up, so that our pick is moving in the right direction. But when we do that, it doesn't sound quite right either. And what I kind of figured out Dan's doing a lot of the time is basically playing 2 out of 3 notes on each string. So with this shape, we would have down, up, pull off, down, up, pull off. Okay? What that means is our upstroke then situates our pick just above the next string we're moving to, and it also gives us a momentary gap as we're doing the pull off to get position there. Okay? So we get this sort of thing. Okay? Which at a glance, it kind of sounds like you've picked everything, but you're not. You're only picking the first 2 in each line of 3. Okay, so just to recap that really quickly: down, up, pull off, down, up, pull off, down, up, pull off, down, up, pull off, down, up, pull off. Okay, so that's the first kind of idea that I want to convey to you guys here. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you are basically not allowing there to be any sort of silence between each string. It should be like one continuous. Okay, if you have little gaps in between, it will sound a little bit kind of jagged and broken up, and that's not what we want. So how do we practice this? Well, this actually brings us to our next kind of pillar concept here, which is to do with phrasing. Now, the temptation with 3-note per string is to play it as triplets, which, if this is our pulse, it means we'd be going 1 and a, 2 and a, 3 and a, 4 and a. Or maybe even sextuplets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But that, again, never really sounds quite right to me, and I realised that when Dan is using kind of 3-note per string shapes, kind of these big ascending or descending runs, he's not grouping stuff as triplets or sextuplets a lot of the time. It's actually as semiquavers or even demi-semiquavers, which is double the speed, which means if this is our pulse, we've either got or double that. Okay, if I demonstrate that slowly, so I'm going to do it as semiquavers first. 1 E under, 2 E under. The reason why it's cool is because it conceals where you're changing string, because it's not happening on the beat, or not every time anyway. It sounds even better when you're working at kind of slower tempos to not only play semiquavers, but double up to demi-semiquavers. Okay, which against the pulse, it starts to get the right sort of sound. Now, one thing you'll notice I'm doing here is at the end I'm only playing 2 notes, and that's because if we're doing semiquavers, da 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 da, to end on our tonic on the beat, we have to cut a note off the end. So I cut 1 note off the last string. So one more time. So just to briefly recap, our 3 pillars here are: 1, we're going to be using 3 note per string scale shapes. Dan will use 2 notes per string sometimes for kind of like fast pentatonic runs, but we're not going to be looking at that today. We'll look at that in like another lesson. Our second thing is that we are going to be picking 2 out of every 3 notes. So if that's descending, we have down, up, pull off, down, up, pull off, which means that our pick is always moving in the right direction, but we also don't have to pick every note. That kind of last pulled off note is a sort of stealth one, where when you're playing it fast enough, it sort of sounds like you are picking it. And then the third and final point is that we want to be grouping things not as triplets or sextuplets like we'd be tempted to do, because it's 3 note per string, which means dividing every beat into 3 or 6 equally. But we're going to be shooting for semiquavers or demi-semiquavers. Yeah. Because that is going to conceal our groups of 3, because we're going to have... You see that when the next beat lands, we're actually midway through the group on the next string. So it kind of breaks up in a pleasing way. So the last thing we're going to leave you with is this cool kind of repeating lick, which I kind of nicked from a Dan solo and then made my own, which kind of goes like this. Okay, and this is just based around F sharp Dorian, which is where we are on the track. But we're only going to use a small part of it, and you can use it in lots of different contexts. So this is your root note, which means it's also like a familiar position of the F sharp minor pentatonic scale, the one starting on the A string, which traditionally is one that everyone knows after the first one. And we have this sort of thing, a pull off from the 12th to the 9th on the high E string. And then we're bringing back this other idea, but in a different way. So we have... Okay, which is picking the 10th fret of the B, picking the 9th fret, but then hammering onto the 10th. So we get... And then when we go back to the E string, we're doing the same thing, picking 2 notes and pulling off 1, picking the 9th, and then pulling off from the 12th. So we start on a group of 2, and then everything else is 3s. Okay? Now, all I was doing differently in the lick at the beginning of the video was... which is just alternating the highest note from the 12th fret to the 14th. You can do this as more of a legato thing, but it doesn't sound the same. It hasn't got the same intensity of when you're picking 2/3 of each pattern. And it sounds a lot closer to alternate picking than legato to my ear. Okay guys, this is a bit of a shorter lesson than last week's 25-minute epic, so I hope you enjoyed it and harvested a couple of cool ideas. Get working on this Dan Huff speed picking technique, and we will go deeper with it in a couple of videos time. Alright guys, have a great day. I'll see you soon.